Hey there, internets. Welcome to Expired Films. I'm Kevin, and I'm here to show you a pinhole camera that I built a few months ago and have some test photos in that I think you guys might be interested. So I saw some people doing some really interesting things with curved film planes, and I've been interested for the past year or so in using photo paper as a photo sensor or a photosensitive material rather than for printing because I don't have an actual darkroom, and that idea kind of intrigued me. So I built an interesting pinhole camera. It was kind of on a whim. I didn't do any math beforehand. I just kind of cut out some pieces, did some things that I thought would be reasonable, lined things up, and it just so happened that everything came together pretty well. So the idea here would be to have a film plane with a convex curve on it. And one of the things that I thought would be interesting to do is to have multiple apertures that would expose this paper. So I decided to use 3 pinholes, and to get them what I thought might be reasonable, I put them at slightly different angles with orientation to the pinhole, to the paper proper. So let's look at this camera. So here is the outside of the pinhole camera. As you can see, my shutter mechanism is the incredibly complicated 3 pieces of electrical tape, which I use to cover the pinholes. The pinholes are visible there. I used Joe Van Cleve's method of using a needle spun around like a drill onto some thin copper sheeting to produce these pinholes. I estimate that they're about 0.3 millimeters across, and measuring for the average distance to the photo paper, I determined that each one is about F194, and it's exposing 5x7 photo paper. So that's how that worked. If we pop the lid off this guy, what we see here in the center, which I'll highlight with my mouse there, if that's visible for you, is the curved film plane. So the curved film plane is a tall 16-ounce drink can around which the photo paper is wrapped. 2 vertical pieces of foam core are on the edges, but they're not really visible in the shot, and they hold the film paper in place. The camera is sized such that it's not really conducive to sticking into a film bag and taking it out in the field, so it's kind of a one-shot wonder there, and then it fits together with a cap that keeps everything light tight. So the very first test shot that I did, I realized I chose the subject kind of poorly because although I'm aware of what this part of the outside looks like, I couldn't really distinguish which image came from which pinhole, where they began, where they overlapped, as well as having some developing issues trying to get everything to come out. And as you can see, there's some damage to this one, as well as a whole lot of dust from my quick and dirty scan. So for my second test shot, I moved a little bit where I would have 3 distinct subjects. This gave me a much better idea for what the field of view for this camera would be, and it is crazily wide. It's not quite 180 degrees, but it's pretty darn close. So these black forested areas on the side, those are you can kind of see where they trail off into the center image and where the image begins to overlap. I was starting to get the exposure down correctly. The first time I metered for it, I realized I didn't account for the fact that there were 3 pinholes rather than just 1. I just kind of metered for F194, which clearly wasn't enough. I made a scientific wild-ass guess, and after this I increased the exposure, my metering, by 2 stops, and that got me pretty close to where I wanted to be. So on the third shot, that's when I became aware of just how wide some of this is. This actually might slightly exceed 180 degrees. So there's a little frog statue which is up against the side of the house. In the one pinhole, you can see all the way down the side of that same wall and off the other one, and the other one's a bit dim, but it's about equally as wide. After I took this shot, I realized there's so much distortion happening because of the curved film plane that using the lines of the background could be really, really interesting. I also discovered that because it is so wide, my distance to subject needed to be reduced dramatically. So this little frog figurine is maybe 10 or 11 inches tall, and the camera was probably about 3.5 feet away. So I was getting a lot more vertical information than I had expected at first, and so I realized that that needed to change. And this is one of the final products that I'm actually pretty pleased with. So I am sitting up against the wall of the house. You can see that the camera is so wide that it stretches the entire length. It inverts it in an interesting way. I set the center of the pinhole to be at kind of about chest height, which caused a little bit of distortion in my face. I thought a selfie might be interesting. And this is very bright direct sunlight and was a 3-minute exposure. So as I got everything kind of tailored in, I really started to get a feel for the exposure. And the siding of the house produced some really, really interesting lines, and you can see just how much distortion is occurring with the curved film plane and 3 pinholes clearly overlapping each other. And yeah, so this is the kind of final project or product for this camera, and I'm really pleased with how this turned out. I think this is a really interesting image, and there's some really cool things I think I could do with some architectural shots with this, considering just how much distortion. One of the things that existed that I hadn't quite planned on is that the pinhole exposure here that you're viewing on the left and the right are inversed to the way reality is, and the way that I had to flip it so that the shirt would read correctly, the image is quite different. So this camera basically collapses space and time in a really interesting way, and it inverts things in a way that's really difficult to kind of wrap one's head around. So I'm pretty pleased with how it came out. So this is the bad boy camera. So to give a feel for just quite how large it is, here's sort of my hand / banana for scale. It is multi-sided, and I eventually changed my design for future cameras. I didn't like the way that this lid kind of sits and hangs over. It tends to get caught on things, and it's a little bit difficult to do. I will eventually mount a tripod 1/4-20 screw there on the bottom, but I haven't done that yet, mostly because the camera is so large and unwieldy that I've just been setting it on objects or the ground. So this is what the, let's see, a little bit difficult to see there, but I have a piece of photo paper wrapped around that central inclined plane, convex curve there, and you can kind of get a see for how that is. So what I would do is I would set this up for the exposure. I would open each shutter in turn and then close it. As soon as I opened up the last shutter, I would start my timer, and then I would just make sure I closed them in the same order at roughly the same speed. It's not super precise, and my process is not super precise. I developed most of these in HC110, I think all of them, which is not typically a paper developer, but it worked pretty well. And 3 minutes is kind of a long time for a person to sit still, but this selfie was the best one that came out. I tried to take another one after this where the pinhole was closer to my face to have less distortion, and I was actually looking at the pinhole rather than over the camera, but I just wasn't able to hold still enough for that shot to come out. So this is just an interesting experiment. It was a 3 pinhole camera with a convex film plane using paper negatives, and kind of produced an interesting look, and I thought I would share it with you guys. So I want to thank everyone for tuning in to this episode of Expired Films. I'm Kevin. Feel free to check me out in the description below. I'm on Flickr and Instagram and a few other places, and I like to do some experimental analog photography, and I like to make weird cameras. So thanks for tuning in, and I will see you guys later.